The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Marshall Tech's executive suite, casting long shadows across the mahogany desk where Ethan Marshall sat motionless. His fingers hovered over a quarterly report he'd been staring at for the past 20 minutes, without reading a single word. Something had fallen from between the pages when he'd opened the binder. A photograph, old, creased at the corners, the colors slightly faded. He picked it up slowly as if it might disintegrate at his touch. There she was, Claire. 6 years ago, sitting on the stone wall outside the university library, her blonde hair catching the autumn sun, braided loosely on both sides the way she always wore it. She was laughing at something he'd said, her head thrown back, completely unguarded. He remembered taking this photo, remembered everything about that day. Ethan set the photo down and pressed his palms against his eyes. What if I had stayed? The question he'd asked himself 1,000 times. The question that never had a good answer. His phone buzzed, a text from the daycare. Liam's ready for pickup. Ethan glanced at his watch. 3:30 already. The investor meeting could wait. His son couldn't. The drive to Sunshine Kids Daycare took 15 minutes through Portland's afternoon traffic. Ethan found Liam sitting on the front steps, small arms wrapped around his stuffed fox, watching the other children get picked up by their parents. Both parents, mothers and fathers, together. The boy looked up as Ethan approached. His face brightened, but only slightly. At 3 years old, Liam Marshall had already learned that awe was a temporary thing. Hey, buddy. Ethan knelt down eye level with his son. Good day? Liam nodded, clutching the fox tighter. We made pancakes, pretend ones. Sounds fun. When is Mommy coming back? The question landed like a punch to the chest. It always did. She'd believed in him when he barely believed in himself. But when the call came, when the moment arrived to choose between love and ambition, he'd chosen ambition. He'd left without saying goodbye, convinced himself it was temporary. That once things settled, once the company was established, he'd come back for her. He never did. By the time Marshall Tech took off, by the time he had the success he'd been chasing, Claire was gone. Her phone number disconnected, her apartment empty, her social media accounts deleted. She'd vanished completely, as if she'd never existed at all. Except she had existed, and Ethan had spent 6 years trying to forget her. 2 years ago, when the company nearly collapsed, when investors pulled out and creditors came calling, he'd married Victoria Chen, a corporate lawyer. She'd kept her maiden name even after marriage, a choice Ethan had respected. Beautiful, brilliant, perfect on paper, she'd seemed like the right choice, the adult choice. She'd left him 14 months later, 3 weeks after their son was born, right when the financial crisis was at its worst. Ethan remembered standing in the nursery at 2 in the morning, holding a screaming infant, absolutely certain he had no idea what he was doing. But Liam had needed him, so he'd figured it out. Now, watching his son sleep, Ethan whispered a promise into the darkness. I won't leave you. Not ever. He meant it. He'd failed Claire. He wouldn't fail his son. Across town, in a small cottage with a garden full of wildflowers, another morning routine was unfolding. Claire Bennett stood at the kitchen counter, braiding her daughter's hair with gentle, practiced movements. Lily sat on a stool, swinging her legs, chattering about the dream she'd had the night before. And then the butterfly turned into a dragon, but a nice dragon, and it took me flying over the clouds. That sounds magical, sweetheart. Do you think dragons are real? I think anything can be real if you believe in it enough. Lily twisted around to look at her mother, her blue eyes serious. Mommy, why don't I have a daddy like the other kids? Claire's hands stilled. This question. She'd been expecting it, dreading it, preparing for it, but no amount of preparation made it easier. She finished the second braid, then turned Lily around to face her. You do have a daddy, Lily. He just doesn't know about you yet. Why not? Because sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes are hard to fix. Will he come find us? Claire felt her throat tighten. Maybe someday. Is he nice? Very nice. One of the nicest people I ever knew. Lily seemed satisfied with this answer. She hopped off the stool and ran to get her backpack, the pink one covered in flower patches. Claire watched her go, blinking back tears. 5 years ago, when she'd discovered she was pregnant, she'd tried to find Ethan. She'd searched for him online, found articles about his growing tech company, his rising success, and then she'd found the engagement announcement. Tech CEO Ethan Marshall announces engagement to corporate lawyer Victoria Chen. The photo showed them at some charity gala, Ethan in a tuxedo, Victoria stunning in a red dress, both of them smiling for the camera. Claire had stared at that photo for hours, her hand on her still flat stomach, making a decision that would change everything. She wouldn't tell him. She wouldn't be the other woman, the complication, the mistake from his past coming back to haunt him. She'd raised the baby alone, and she had. For 5 years, she'd built a life, small but warm, simple but full of love. She taught preschool at Riverside Academy. She tended her garden. She told Lily stories about a kind man who once made her believe the world was good. She never said his name. The annual spring fair at Riverfront Park was a tradition Portland had maintained for 3 decades. Every April, when the dogwoods bloomed and the weather turned mild, the city transformed a 5-block radius into a celebration of community. Claire led her class of 15 preschoolers through the gates, clipboard in hand, mentally running through her checklist. 15 names, 15 emergency contacts, 15 little souls she was responsible for keeping safe. Lily skipped ahead, her pink dress swirling, her flower-covered rain boots making squelching sounds even though the ground was dry. She held a plastic cup of lemonade, sipping it carefully, trying not to spill. "Stay close, sweetheart," Claire called. "I will, Mommy." The fair was magnificent. Booths selling handmade crafts lined the walkways. A carousel turned slowly, its painted horses rising and falling to cheerful music. The smell of cotton candy and popcorn filled the air. Children shrieked with laughter. Parents chatted. Vendors called out their wares. The sky above was a perfect blue, not a cloud in sight. Claire checked her watch. 11:15. They had until 1 o'clock, then back to school for nap time. Everything according to schedule. She didn't see the sky beginning to change. Ethan had scheduled the investor meeting for 10 o'clock at the Civic Center, 2 blocks from Riverfront Park. The presentation had gone well. Better than well. 3 major firms were now interested in Marshall Tech's new AI platform. By noon, he'd fielded 6 calls from potential partners. He should have been elated. Instead, he felt hollow. Success used to mean something, used to fill the empty spaces inside him. Lately, it just made the spaces feel emptier. His assistant had suggested lunch at a new restaurant downtown, but Ethan declined. He needed air, needed to clear his head. He told his driver to wait and started walking. The spring air was warm. The streets were busy with weekend crowds heading to the fair. Ethan walked without destination, hands in his pockets, letting his mind wander. That photograph this morning had shaken something loose. Memories he'd carefully buried were surfacing. Claire's laugh, the way she'd scrunch her nose when she was concentrating, how she'd fall asleep reading, a book still open on her chest, always with a sprig of lavender tucked inside as a bookmark. Lavender. She'd loved that scent. Ethan passed a flower cart and caught a whiff of it. The memory hit him so hard, he had to stop walking. He'd hurt her. He knew that now, had known it then, but had convinced himself it was necessary. The price of ambition. The cost of success. What a fool he'd been. He was so lost in thought that he almost didn't notice when the sky changed. It happened fast. One moment, blue and clear. The next, dark clouds rolling in from the west like a wave. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in 30 seconds. Thunder cracked. Not distant rumbling, but a sharp, violent sound that made people on the street look up in alarm. Then the hail began. Not gradually, not a few scattered pieces. It came down like a curtain dropping, ice pellets the size of marbles hammering everything below. Chaos erupted instantly. People screamed. Parents grabbed their children. Vendors scrambled to cover their booths. The cheerful sounds of the fair dissolved into panic. Ethan ran toward the park entrance. Through the blur of falling ice, he could see people fleeing, could hear a loudspeaker shouting instructions to seek shelter in the Civic Center. That's when he saw her, a small figure in pink, huddled beneath a wooden bench near the edge of the path. Her arms were wrapped over her head, her knees drawn up tight. Hailstones bounced off the pavement around her, some striking her small body. She was shaking, terrified. Ethan didn't think, didn't calculate, didn't hesitate. He sprinted across the street as hail pounded his shoulders and back. The impacts hurt, sharp stings that would leave bruises, but he barely felt them. He dropped to his knees beside the bench and looked at the little girl. "Hey," he said, his voice somehow calm despite everything. "You're okay now." Wide blue eyes looked up at him. Her lower lip trembled. Tears streaked her cheeks. "I lost my mommy. It's all right, I've got you." He shrugged off his wool coat and wrapped it around her small frame. She was so tiny, so fragile. He lifted her gently, cradling her against his chest. Her arms went around his neck immediately, her face pressing into his shoulder. Ethan ran. The hail was relentless, striking his head and back, but he curved his body around the child, shielding her. His SUV was parked half a block away. Felt like half a mile. He yanked open the back door and climbed inside, still holding her. Pulled the door shut. The sound of hail on metal and glass was deafening, but inside they were safe. He set her carefully on the seat, then reached for the blanket he kept him back. His chauffeur always stocked the car with emergency supplies. Ethan had never been more grateful. He draped the blanket around her shoulders, turned the heat up high, then knelt on the floor of the SUV so he could be at her eye level. "Are you hurt anywhere?" She shook her head, her blonde curls damp against her forehead. "What's your name?" "Lily." "Hi, Lily, I'm Ethan. We're going to find your mom, okay? But first, let's make sure you're warm." He took a tissue from the console and gently wiped the tears from her face. Her eyes never left his. There was something about those eyes, something familiar he couldn't quite place. Outside, the hailstorm continued its assault. Inside the car, wrapped in silence and warmth, Lily studied him with an intensity that seemed beyond her years. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "My mom used to tell me about you." Ethan froze. "What did you say?" She smiled, shy, a tiny dimple appearing in her left cheek. "She told me stories about a man who was brave and kind. I think it was you." For several seconds, Ethan couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The world outside continued to rage, but inside this small bubble of space, everything had gone still. "What stories?" His voice sounded strange to his own ears. Stories about someone who made her laugh, someone who was smart and worked really hard, someone with kind eyes. She reached out and touched his face with one small hand. "You have kind eyes." Ethan's throat closed up. He didn't trust himself to speak. He looked at her more carefully now. The blonde hair, the blue eyes, the tilt of her head, the way she watched him, curious but unafraid. Something stirred in his chest. Something that felt like recognition, like déjà vu, like a memory he couldn't quite grasp. Her voice. He'd heard that voice somewhere. Softer, older, but the same cadence. Claire. The thought slammed into him with the force of the hail outside. This child's mother had told her about him, about a man who was brave and kind, about someone with kind eyes. Claire had said he had kind eyes. Back when they were together, she'd said it all the time. But that was impossible. This child was 5, maybe 6 years old. He'd left Claire 6 years ago, unless. Ethan's hands started shaking. He clasped them together to hide it. "Your mom," he said carefully. "What's her name?" "Claire, her name is Claire." The SUV suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. Ethan sat back on his heels, his mind racing through calculations he didn't want to make. 6 years since he'd left. This child was 5, maybe 6. The timeline fit perfectly. But Claire would have told him, wouldn't she? If she'd been pregnant, if she'd had his child, she would have found a way to reach him. Unless she'd tried and he'd been too focused on his company to notice. Unless she'd decided he didn't deserve to know. Unless she'd seen the engagement announcement and decided to protect her child from a man who'd already proven he could leave. "Lily," his voice cracked on her name. "Does your mom have blonde hair, braided on both sides?" Lily nodded enthusiastically. "Just like mine. We match." "Oh God, oh God. Does she teach at a school?" "Yes, she's the best teacher. All the kids love her." Ethan closed his eyes. When he opened them, Lily was still watching him, still wrapped in his coat and blanket, still trusting him completely. He saw it now, really saw it. The shape of her face, the curve of her chin, the way her left eyebrow arched slightly higher than her right, the small birthmark near her hairline. He had the same birthmark, in the exact same place. This was his daughter. The thought was so overwhelming, so impossible, and yet so obvious that Ethan had to brace himself against the seat. This was his daughter, and he had had no idea she existed. The hail began to slow, then stopped. The sudden silence was jarring. People emerged from buildings looking around at the ice-covered streets in disbelief. "We should find your mom," Ethan managed. "She's probably very worried. She gets scared when she can't see me, but she'll feel better when she knows you saved me." Saved me. The words echoed in his head. He'd saved his own daughter without knowing she was his daughter. What kind of cosmic joke was that? "Can you tell me your last name, Lily?" "Bennett, Lily Bennett, not Marshall. Bennett, Claire's last name. Of course, why would Claire have given her his name? He'd abandoned her, disappeared, married someone else." Ethan pulled out his phone with trembling fingers and called the emergency number posted for the fair. They directed him to the medical center that had been set up in the Civic Center for anyone injured in the storm. "Come on, sweetheart, let's get you to your mom." He lifted Lily carefully and carried her across the street. The ice crunched under his feet. His shirt was soaked, his hair dripping, but he barely noticed. All his attention was on the small girl in his arms, her head resting on his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck. His daughter, his daughter, his daughter. The words beat in time with his heart. The hallway outside the community medical center buzzed with controlled chaos. Nurses moved efficiently between rooms. Parents called out names. Children cried. Volunteers handed out blankets and hot chocolate. Claire pushed through the crowd, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "Excuse me," she said to a nurse stationed at a desk. "My daughter, Lily Bennett, 5 years old, blonde hair, pink dress. We got separated during the storm." The nurse scanned a clipboard, then looked up with a kind smile. "Room 7, straight down the hall, then right. She's safe." Safe. The word hit Claire like a wave. Her knees nearly buckled. She stumbled forward, following the directions, her vision blurring with tears she'd been holding back. Room 7. She could see the door, could see through the small window. And what she saw made her stop breathing. Ethan Marshall sat on a small plastic chair, leaning forward slightly, gently patting dry the curls of the little girl in front of him. His expensive gray suit jacket was draped over the back of the chair. His sleeves were damp and wrinkled. His tie hung loose. His white shirt clung to him in places. But it wasn't his disheveled appearance that paralyzed Claire. It was his face. The sharp, calculating expression he wore in business magazines was gone. In its place was something she hadn't seen in 6 years. Tenderness, focus, care. His brow furrowed in concentration as he worked, his movements gentle and precise, as if nothing else in the world existed except the child in front of him. And Lily sat calmly beneath his touch, eyes closed, peaceful, trusting him completely. Claire's hand went to her mouth. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what she was seeing. This was the moment she'd dreaded for 5 years, the moment she'd convinced herself would never come, the moment Ethan Marshall met his daughter without knowing she was his daughter. Except, watching him now, watching the way he looked at Lily, Claire wondered if some part of him already knew. She pushed open the door. "Mommy!" Lily jumped from the chair and launched herself into Claire's arms. Claire caught her, holding her so tightly the child squeaked. "I've got you, baby. I've got you." Then Lily pulled back, her face glowing. "This is the man from your stories, right?" The sentence hung in the air like a blade. Claire froze. Time fractured. The walls seemed to close in. Lily had never said Ethan's name. Claire had been so careful. 5 years of stories about a kind man, a brave man, a smart man, but never a name, never identifying details. And yet, somehow, Lily knew. Children were magic that way. They saw things adults couldn't, made connections that defied logic. Claire's eyes lifted slowly, inevitably, to meet Ethan's. He was standing now, tall, broader than she remembered, or maybe time had just made him seem larger. His hair was shorter, his jaw stronger. His eyes had lines at the corners that hadn't been there before, but they were the same eyes, green, intense, searching. Ethan, she said softly. The name felt strange on her tongue after 6 years of silence. Claire. His voice was rough, as if he'd been shouting or crying. Hi. The word was so inadequate it was almost funny. 6 years of silence, and all they had was hi. Lily looked between them, sensing something important was happening, but not understanding what. You still wear your hair the same way, Ethan said after a moment. His voice was quieter now, almost fragile. Claire reached up, touching one of her braids. Some things don't change. No, I guess they don't. Silence stretched between them. Uncomfortable. Heavy. Full of everything they weren't saying. Are you okay? Ethan asked gently. Both of you? I am now. Claire squeezed Lily closer. Ethan's eyes dropped to the little girl. Something flickered there. Something deep and searching. Claire could see him trying to piece things together. Could see the questions forming. But he didn't ask, not yet. Thank you, Claire said, her voice trembling. For helping her. Ethan gave a small nod. Of course. His eyes lingered on Lily a second longer, then shifted back to Claire. There was so much behind that look. Curiosity, confusion, something that might have been hope. Claire stepped back before any of it could surface. We should go. I need to get her checked out properly. She turned and guided Lily toward the hallway. The crowd had thinned. Her heartbeat hadn't. At the door, she couldn't resist. She looked back. Ethan was still standing in the same spot, his tall frame silhouetted by the fluorescent light of the medical room. He hadn't moved, hadn't looked away. Something about that stillness told Claire everything she needed to know. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The text arrived the next afternoon while Claire was organizing art supplies in her classroom. Just one word on her phone screen. Coffee? She stared at it for a long time. Long enough that the screen went dark. She tapped it back to life and read the word again, as if it might have changed. 6 years of silence, and now he wanted coffee. Her hands were shaking when she typed back, Okay. When? The response came immediately. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock. You know where. She did know where. Of course she knew where. There was only one place it could be. Claire set her phone down and pressed her palms flat against the desk, trying to steady herself. Around her, the classroom looked exactly as it always did. Bright alphabet letters on the walls, small chairs arranged in a circle, the faint smell of crayons and glue. Everything normal. Everything the same. Except nothing was the same anymore. That night, after Lily fell asleep clutching her lavender bunny, Claire sat in the dark living room and let herself remember. The lakeside cafe hadn't changed in 6 years. The same ivy still climbed the brick walls. The same weathered chairs still lined the porch overlooking the water. The same creaky boards still groaned under footsteps. Ethan arrived first. He stood when he saw her approaching, his hand moving to the back of his neck in that gesture she remembered so well. The one that meant he was nervous, unsure what to say. Claire, hey. They sat, ordered. For a while they talked about nothing that mattered. The storm, the weather, the town's new library, safe topics, surface topics, words that filled space without touching anything real. But silence has a way of demanding truth. It was 6 years ago, Ethan said finally, his voice quiet. Feels like a lifetime. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, Claire replied, watching the lake ripple in the breeze. He hesitated, then continued. Back then, I was building something, or trying to. My entire focus was on the company. The pitch deck was practically a second language. The investors were circling. New York wanted me. I remember. I told myself I had to go, that if I didn't make it happen then, I'd lose everything. He paused, his jaw working. But I didn't see what I was already losing. Claire wrapped both hands around her coffee mug, needing something to hold on to. We never really ended, did we? No. Ethan shook his head slowly. I think I just disappeared. You didn't even say goodbye. I know. His voice cracked slightly. I told myself it was temporary, that once things settled, I'd come back. But I didn't. I wasn't brave enough. Claire looked out toward the lake, watching the sky's reflections shimmer on the surface. Clouds drifted across the water, like thoughts that never stayed in one place. "You meant something to me, Ethan," she said finally. "But maybe we were never meant to be a story that finished." He looked at her then, really looked. Not the polite glance of strangers, but the deep seeing of people who once knew each other's souls. "You were important to me too, Claire. I just wasn't man enough to protect that. I thought I had to choose between love and success, and I chose wrong." She said nothing, but her eyes softened. Some wounds were too old for anger. Ethan told her what had happened since. 2 years ago, the company nearly collapsed. An investor pulled out at the worst possible moment. Accounts froze. Articles surfaced, tearing him apart. His reputation shredded overnight. Victoria left within weeks. Their son had just turned 1. "I remember holding Liam and realizing I didn't know how to be a father," Ethan admitted, staring at his hands. "I was a mess, but he needed me, so I figured it out." Claire listened in silence, her arms wrapped around herself. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm raising Lily alone too. No one knows who her father is. I never told anyone." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "But I used to tell her stories about a kind man, the kind who once made me believe the world had something good in it." Ethan didn't speak. His jaw clenched as though he were holding back a question he couldn't yet ask. They paid their bill and stepped off the patio. Lily had been playing nearby with a stack of picture books that the cafe kept for children. She ran up to them now, her face bright with joy. From her little backpack, she pulled out a small, flattened sprig of lavender. "This is for you, Mr. Ethan," she said proudly, holding it out. "Mommy said you like this smell." Ethan took the flower from her gently, his fingers trembling slightly. He stared at it as if she'd handed him something precious beyond measure. "I do," he said, his voice rough. "I really do." The memories flooded back. Claire in college, always using lavender as a bookmark. The scent clinging to his hoodie after she hugged him. That fragrance had been the smell of happiness, of safety, of a time when the world made sense. As Lily skipped ahead, humming to herself, Ethan stood motionless. The lavender pressed between his fingers like a message from the past. Some wounds never closed, but some memories never faded. And maybe, just maybe, some pieces still belong together. The email from the school board arrived 2 days later. Classroom repairs would take at least 48 hours. Riverside Preschool would be closed for 2 days while contractors fixed hail damage to the roof. Claire sighed, staring at her laptop screen. She planned to stay home with Lily, but that same morning brought an urgent complication. A district-wide emergency budget meeting. As the lead representative for early education, she couldn't miss it. She scrolled through her contacts, trying to figure out who to call. Her mother was out of town. Her usual backup sitter had the flu. Fate, it seemed, had other plans. At the children's bookstore downtown later that afternoon, Claire and Lily ran into them. More precisely, Lily ran into Liam. "Hey," Lily squealed, spotting the small boy near the dinosaur section. "You!" Liam looked up from a picture book, his eyes widening. "From the park!" The two children threw their arms around each other like reunited friends who'd been separated for years rather than days. Ethan stood nearby, holding a book about prehistoric creatures. He rose slowly when he saw Claire, his expression unreadable but not unkind. "We meet again," he said. Claire managed a smile. "Looks like the kids already know each other." "They do. Park buddies, I guess." Lily and Liam plopped down on the carpet, immediately absorbed in a pop-up book about ocean animals. Their heads bent together, blonde and dark brown, completely focused. Claire hesitated, then admitted what she'd been trying to solve all morning. "Lily's school is closed after the storm. I have a board meeting this afternoon. I was trying to figure out childcare." Ethan looked at the children, then back at her. Something shifted in his expression. "If you trust me, I can take them both. They clearly get along." Every instinct told Claire to say no, to keep distance, to keep her secrets safe. But Lily was beaming, her eyes full of hope, and Ethan, normally so guarded, looked almost gentle. "Just the afternoon," Claire heard herself say. "I'll have them back by 5, Ethan promised. The small zoo outside Portland was quiet on a Thursday afternoon, perfect for two children and a man trying to remember how to laugh. Lily grabbed Liam's hand the moment they passed through the gates. "Come on, I want to see the lions." They ran from one enclosure to the next, faces pressed against glass, pointing and gasping. Lily narrated everything, turning each animal into a character from a fairy tale. The elephant was a wise king. The monkeys were mischievous princes. The giraffe was a gentle queen who could see everything from her tall tower. Liam, normally so shy, followed her lead with an increasingly bright smile. Ethan sat on a wooden bench nearby, sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup. He watched his son transform. Liam was laughing, actually laughing, a sound Ethan hadn't heard in months. And Lily, there was something about her that felt so familiar it hurt. Her questions, her joy, her presence, like deja vu that wouldn't fade. At the concession stand, Ethan bought them ice cream cones. Vanilla for Liam, strawberry for Lily. They sat at a picnic table, the afternoon sun warm on their faces. "Mr. Ethan," Lily said suddenly, looking up at him with those impossibly blue eyes, "have you ever loved someone so much that you still remember them all the time?" Ethan paused, his coffee halfway to his mouth. The question landed with unexpected weight. "Yes," he said quietly, "and I think I never stopped remembering." Lily nodded solemnly as if this made perfect sense. "That's how Mommy is. She remembers someone too." She went back to her ice cream, unaware that she'd just confirmed what Ethan had been afraid to believe. Claire remembered him. After 6 years. After everything. She still remembered. When clouds began rolling in around 4 o'clock, Ethan guided the children to a bookstore 3 blocks away. While Lily and Liam settled into the reading corner with a stack of picture books, Ethan wandered through the aisles. At the back of the store, near the art supplies, he found a wooden display of colored pencils. One particular box caught his eye, hand-carved, with space on the lid for engraving. He didn't know why he picked it up. Maybe it reminded him of the boxes Claire used to collect in college. She'd had a whole shelf of them, each one a different color, each one holding a different memory. "Can you engrave this?" he asked the clerk. "Of course. What would you like it to say?" Ethan thought for a moment. "Lily's World." 20 minutes later in the car, he handed the box to Lily. She gasped, her small hands trembling as she opened it. Inside, 24 colored pencils lay in perfect rows, each one a different shade. "I'm going to draw everything I love," she whispered, hugging the box to her chest. "This is my favorite thing ever." On the drive back to Claire's house, both children fell asleep in the back seat. Their heads leaned together, mouths slightly open, breathing in sync. Ethan glanced in the rearview mirror and froze. There, in the soft afternoon light, he could see it. Really see it. The shape of Lily's face, the curve of her chin, the way her eyebrows arched, the small hands curled in her lap. She looked like Liam. Not just similar, not just coincidentally alike. They looked like siblings, and they both looked like him. The realization hit him so hard he had to pull over for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, trying to breathe. It wasn't possible. Except it was. The timeline matched perfectly. Claire had disappeared 6 years ago. Lily was 5. Coincidence, he whispered to himself in the quiet car. But he didn't believe in coincidences anymore. He pulled into Claire's driveway as the sky turned golden with approaching sunset. The small cottage looked warm and inviting. Flower boxes in the windows, a garden full of wildflowers along the path, and leaning against the porch railing, nearly hidden behind climbing roses, was a small pink bicycle. Ethan's breath caught. On the bike's frame, in uneven hand-painted letters, were 2 initials. LM, not LB, for Lily Bennett. LM, Lily Marshall. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. He sat in the car, staring at those letters, his world tilting on its axis. She knew, Lily knew, or someone had told her, or she'd chosen those letters herself for reasons he couldn't fathom. But there they were, his initials, on his daughter's bicycle. Because she was his daughter. There was no more denying it, no more pretending it was coincidence or wishful thinking. Lily was his daughter, and Claire had kept her hidden for 5 years. The front door opened. Claire stepped out, clearly nervous, wrapping her cardigan tighter around herself. Ethan got out of the car slowly, opened the back door, gently woke the children. "They were perfect," he said softly when Claire reached him. "Thanks for trusting me." Claire looked torn, her eyes searching his face for something she couldn't name. Thank you for giving her such a good day. Their eyes held for a moment too long. Both of them aware that something unspoken was building between them. Both of them afraid to name it. That night, Ethan sat in his home office, a quarterly report open before him, completely unread. His mind circled around a little girl in a pink dress, the way she tilted her head when she was curious, exactly like him. The way she furrowed her brow when concentrating, just like him. The habit of turning a ring around her thumb when deep in thought. He did the same thing, her voice. My mom used to tell me about you. That line had lodged in his chest like a splinter. 6 years ago, Claire had vanished from his life. 5 years ago, Lily was born. The timeline was perfect, too perfect. He pushed the report aside. Numbers could wait. The truth couldn't. The next morning, Ethan visited Riverside Preschool under the pretense of delivering a corporate donation. He wore his usual tailored suit, carried a check for $10,000, played the role everyone expected. Wealthy CEO doing charity work. Good publicity. But the moment Lily saw him through the classroom window, she dropped her crayons and ran. Mr. Ethan! She launched herself into his arms and he caught her, kneeling down to her level. Over her shoulder, he saw Claire frozen in the doorway, her face pale. A teacher nearby chuckled. You two look alike. Same eyes, same smile. It's uncanny. Ethan watched panic flicker across Claire's face. She moved quickly, pulling Lily away, redirecting the conversation with practiced ease, guiding her daughter to the reading corner. But it was too late. Ethan left without a word, but the teacher's comment echoed in his mind. You two look alike. An hour later, he stood at Claire's front door, heart pounding, hands shaking. Everything he thought he knew about his life rearranging itself into a new pattern. The pink bicycle was still there, leaning against the railing. LM, he rang the doorbell. Claire answered, surprise turning quickly to something closer to dread. Is something wrong? Yes, Ethan said quietly. It's about your daughter. She hesitated, her hand tightening on the doorframe. Ethan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, a beaded bracelet. Lily had dropped it the day before in his car. She said she made this herself, he said, his voice carefully controlled. Who helped her? He held it up. On the heart-shaped charm, 2 tiny letters were painted in silver. E.M. Ethan Marshall. E.M., he repeated. That's not random, Claire. Her lips parted, her eyes filled with tears. I counted the years, Ethan continued, stepping closer. You left 6 years ago. Lily is 5. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Ethan, Claire whispered, but no other words came. Tell me the truth. His voice cracked. Is she mine? The question hung in the air between them. 5 years of secrets compressed into 3 words. Claire let the tears come. She gave a slow, silent nod. Ethan inhaled sharply as if he'd been punched. His legs nearly gave way. He grabbed the porch railing for support. All this time, he said, barely above a whisper, I had a daughter. I wasn't hiding her to hurt you, Claire said quickly, desperately. I was protecting her. You were falling apart. The company was failing. I didn't know if you'd even survive it. And I thought she'd only make it harder. Ethan gave a soft, bitter laugh. But she's the only thing that would have saved me. He turned away for a moment, hands pressed against his face, shoulders shaking. When he faced her again, his eyes were red, but his voice was steadier. I need time, he said, not to forgive you, but to learn how to be a father to her. He started down the steps, the bracelet clutched in his shaking fingers. Mr. Ethan? The small voice stopped him. He turned. Lily stood in the doorway behind Claire, clutching her lavender bunny. She looked up at him with those impossibly earnest eyes. Don't be sad, she said softly. Mommy says good people always find their way back to where they belong. Ethan's chest ached. He knelt on the bottom step, eye level with her, brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. I promise, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I'll come back. Okay. Lily nodded solemnly and wrapped her small arms around his neck. As he walked away, the sunset painted the sky in gold and amber. In his hand, the bracelet his daughter had made. The first piece of her he would carry with him. A new chapter had begun, and this time he would not walk away. The following week unfolded in careful steps. Ethan didn't rush, didn't demand, didn't try to claim anything that hadn't been offered. He spent time with Lily, but never called himself her father. Not yet. Instead, he listened, watched, learned. She painted clouds that looked like animals, made up stories about flowers that could talk, asked questions that stayed with him long after she'd gone to bed. Do grown-ups forget people they love if they're too busy? No, sweetheart, he'd answered, his heart breaking. They might try, but love doesn't forget. Claire remained cautious, letting him into their lives one small step at a time. Trust didn't rebuild overnight, but each time Ethan showed up outside Lily's classroom just to wave goodbye, or knelt to tie her shoes without being asked, Claire's carefully constructed walls dropped a little lower. And Liam changed too. The shy boy who once clung to his father's leg now ran to greet Lily every morning. They'd become inseparable, two puzzle pieces that had finally found each other. Claire became Miss Claire to Liam, a name he said with warmth that pierced Ethan's heart. They were becoming something. Not quite a family yet, but something close to it. Then on a bright Saturday morning, everything shifted. Ethan took both children to Riverside Park. Lily chased butterflies through the grass. Liam played on the swings, his laughter carrying on the breeze. Ethan pushed the swing gently, smiling, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Well, isn't this domestic? The cold, familiar voice shattered everything. Ethan turned slowly. Victoria stood there in designer heels and an expensive coat, sunglasses pushed up on her head, arms crossed. Her eyes moved from Ethan to Claire, who stood frozen several feet away, then to the children playing nearby. Victoria. Ethan's voice was flat. Liam, Victoria called, her tone syrupy sweet. Come say hi to Mommy. The boy hesitated, looking at Ethan with uncertainty. Ethan stepped on between them, jaw tight. What are you doing here? Victoria's smile was thin and sharp. I want to come back. Liam is my son. He belongs with me. You left when he could barely talk. And now you're back into the headlines. Her eyes gleamed. Success looks good on you, Ethan. I'm just here to complete the redemption arc. The broken family, reunited. It's a good story. You're not part of this story anymore. Victoria stepped closer, her voice dropping to ice. Then I'll fight for custody. The courts might be interested in hearing about your emotional history, or the fact that you've been hiding a child from the public. Her eyes flicked to Lily. You're not exactly stable, are you? She walked away, leaving the threat hanging in the air like smoke. That evening, Ethan told Claire everything. They sat in her living room after Lily had gone to bed, the weight of Victoria's threat pressing down on both of them. I knew something would come to take this away, Claire whispered, arms wrapped tightly around herself. I won't let her, Ethan said firmly. I'm not talking about her. Claire's voice broke. I'm talking about us. I've seen how fast things fall apart, Ethan. I can't let Lily or Liam get caught in that. He stepped closer, wanting to reach for her, but she moved back. I think we should put space between us, for now, until this is sorted out. Claire, behind arm, he started, but the look in her eyes stopped him. She wasn't angry. She was protecting something she loved. And Ethan realized for the first time that love wasn't just about showing up. It was about fighting, patiently and honestly, for the chance to stay. Not for custody, not for control, but for trust, for them. The law office occupied the 42nd floor of a glass tower in downtown Portland, offering a view of the city that spread out like a map of ambition and power. Ethan sat across from Victoria in a conference room designed to intimidate, all polished marble and leather chairs that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Victoria wore red lipstick and a smug expression. Her legs crossed elegantly, manicured nails tapping a rhythm against her designer handbag. The sound grated on Ethan's nerves, but he kept his face neutral, his posture relaxed. You always did look good under pressure, she said, her voice smooth as silk and just as cold. But let's not pretend you're in control here. Ethan said nothing. He'd learned long ago that silence was often the most powerful response. Victoria leaned forward, her smile razor sharp. You want to play happy family with your ex and her kid? Fine. But I'm Liam's mother, and I have every right to bring him back, especially now that the media has rediscovered your name. She paused, letting the words sink in. And if I recall correctly, 2 years ago, you were one bankruptcy away from a breakdown. Not exactly Father of the Year material. You mean the breakdown you walked away from? Ethan's voice was calm, almost conversational. That's called survival, Victoria. That's called being unstable, she countered. And now you've got another child you've been hiding. A daughter no one knew about. The press will love that story. Tech CEO's secret love child. Very scandalous. Her lawyer, a gray-haired man who'd been silent until now, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Ethan opened the folder he'd brought with him. Slowly, deliberately, he slid it across the polished table. No, he said quietly. This is survival. Victoria's expression faltered for the first time as she opened the folder. Inside, documents were organized with meticulous precision. Therapy records showing Ethan's commitment to his mental health. Detailed parenting schedules documenting every moment he'd spent with Liam. A glowing psychological evaluation from a licensed family therapist. Reference letters from Liam's daycare, his pediatrician, even neighbors who'd watched Ethan transform from a struggling, single father into someone stable and present. There were financial records, too, showing the company's complete recovery. Bank statements proving Ethan could provide for his son. Everything needed to prove he was not just capable, but exceptional. Victoria's jaw tightened as she flipped through page after page. Her lawyer leaned over, whispering something urgent in her ear. I wanted to keep this private, Ethan said, his voice still eerily calm. He pulled out a tablet and set it on the table. But Liam asked to say something, just in case. He pressed play. The video showed Liam sitting on his small bed, clutching his stuffed fox to his chest. The camera angle suggested someone had set up a phone on a dresser, giving the footage an intimate, unpolished quality that made it feel achingly real. Hi, Liam said softly, looking directly at the camera. Daddy said I could talk if I wanted to. He paused, gathering his thoughts with the careful consideration of a child who'd learned early that words mattered. Daddy always reads to me before bed, every night, even when he's tired from work. He does the voices for all the characters, and he lets me pick the stories. Liam's small fingers twisted in the fox's fur. He makes pancakes on Sundays. We put chocolate chips in them and make faces. Mine always look funny, but Daddy says they're perfect. Another pause. The boy's eyes grew shinier. Miss Claire helps me draw. She taught me how to make trees that look real. And Lily is my best friend. She tells the best stories. We're building a castle out of blocks at her house. Liam looked down at the fox in his arms, then back at the camera. I like our house. It's not very big, but it's warm. Daddy lets me help make dinner. He says I'm a good helper. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. I don't want it to change again. Last time everything changed, I was little, but I remember being shot a lot. The silence stretched. Then Liam looked directly into the lens, his eyes old beyond his years. I love my daddy. The video ended. The conference room sat in absolute silence. Even the tapping of Victoria's nails had stopped. Her lawyer leaned over again, this time speaking longer, more urgently. Victoria's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Calculation, frustration. Finally, something that might have been shame, though it disappeared so quickly Ethan almost thought he'd imagined shouted. This isn't over, she said, standing abruptly, but her voice lacked the confidence it had carried when she'd walked in. It already is, Ethan replied. Victoria gathered her things with sharp, angry movements. At the door, she paused without turning around. He deserves better than what we gave him. It was the closest thing to an apology Ethan would ever get from her. He accepted it with a slight nod she didn't see. The door closed. Ethan sat alone in the conference room, the video of his son still paused on the tablet screen. Liam's face frozen in that moment of vulnerability and courage. Ethan pressed his palms against his eyes and allowed himself exactly 30 seconds to shake. Then he stood, gathered his materials, and left. He had somewhere more important to be. Rain fell softly when Ethan arrived at Claire's house that evening. The kind of gentle rain that whispered against windows rather than pounded. The porch light glowed warm and golden behind the screen door, casting long shadows across the garden. Claire opened the door before he could knock, as if she'd been watching for him. She looked tired, beautiful and tired, her hair loose around her shoulders instead of braided, her eyes carrying the weight of worry. Is everything okay? She asked quietly. Ethan nodded. It's done. She's not coming after Liam. Relief flickered across Claire's face like sunlight breaking through clouds, but hesitation remained, hovering in the space between them. And now, she asked? Ethan stepped forward, close enough that he could see the small scar on her chin from when she'd fallen off her bike in college, close enough to smell the faint scent of lavender that still clung to her hair. Now I stopped letting fear write my story, he said, his voice low and steady. Claire blinked, her breath catching. I don't want another chance with the past, Claire might. I want a future. His eyes searched hers with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she'd forgotten was possible. And it's you, it's Lily, it's Liam. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. His fingers were warm despite the cold rain that had soaked through his jacket. That's home, he said softly. You're my home. Claire stared at him, and something broke inside her. Not in a painful way, but like ice breaking in spring. Like something frozen finally beginning to thaw. I was so scared, she whispered. And then the tears came. I didn't want to believe we could have this, that we deserved this. I was so afraid of losing it that I almost threw it away before we even started. You don't have to be afraid alone anymore, Ethan whispered back. But before Claire could respond, before she could step into his arms, she pulled back slightly. Her hand remained in his, but she needed him to hear something first. I need to tell you the truth. All of it. Ethan waited, his thumb tracing small circles on her palm. I did look for you, Claire said, her voice breaking. 6 years ago, when I found out I was pregnant. I was 3 months along, and I was terrified, but I thought you had the right to know. Ethan's grip on her hand tightened. I found you online. Read about the company's success, how well you were doing, and I thought maybe we could figure something out. Co-parent, at least. Give our child a father, even if we couldn't be together. The rain picked up slightly, drumming a gentle rhythm on the porch roof. I drove to Portland, to your office building. I was going to walk in, ask to see you, tell you everything. Claire's eyes were distant now, seeing a memory that still hurt. But when I got there, when I was standing in the parking garage working up the courage, I saw you. Claire, Ethan breathed, beginning to understand. You were on the waterfront plaza. There were flowers everywhere, rose petals scattered on the ground. Victoria was there in a white dress. You were on one knee. The words hung in the air like shattered glass. I watched you propose to her, Claire continued, her voice barely audible. Watched her say yes. Watched you kiss her while a photographer took pictures and a crowd applauded. And I stood there with my hand on my stomach, 3 months pregnant with your daughter, watching you start a life with someone else. Ethan's face had gone pale. Claire, I didn't know. If I had known, if you had told me, what would you have done, she asked, not unkindly. Broken off your engagement? Married me out of obligation? Resented me? Resented her for trapping you? No, Ethan said fiercely. I would have chosen you. Both of you. Every time. You don't know that. You can't know that. You were different then. We both were. Claire wiped her eyes with her free hand, so I turned around, drove home, deleted your number, decided that my daughter deserved better than being the reason someone's life fell apart. She deserved to know her father, Ethan said, his voice rough with emotion. Yes, she did, and I took that from her, and I took 5 years from you, and I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life. Claire's tears fell freely now. But I did what I thought was right at the time, what I thought would protect her, even if it was wrong, even if it hurt all of us. Ethan pulled her into his arms then, and Claire let herself break, let herself cry for the years lost, for the decisions made in fear, for the life they might have had if circumstances had been different. I wish you had stayed, Ethan murmured into her hair. I wish I had seen you. Everything would have been different. We can't change the past, Claire said against his chest. No, but we can choose the future. They stood there in the rain, holding each other as years of pain and regret washed away like dust. Inside the house, through the window, they could see 2 small faces pressed against the glass. Lily and Liam, watching their parents with the wide-eyed wonder of children who were beginning to understand that something important was happening. When Ethan and Claire finally pulled apart, both of them were crying, but they were also smiling. "For the record," Ethan said, brushing a tear from her cheek, "I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day in 6 years. I convinced myself I had, but I was lying. To myself, to everyone." Claire laughed, the sound watery but genuine. "That's a terrible thing to say to someone you're trying to win back." "I'm not trying to win you back." Ethan's smile was soft, tender. "I'm just trying to be honest. Finally, about everything." "Then here's my honesty." Claire took both his hands in hers. "You hurt me. Leaving the way you did, it broke something in me. And finding out I was pregnant alone, raising Lily without you, watching her ask about her father, it made me angry. At you, at myself, at the universe." Oh, Ethan nodded, accepting the truth of it. "But anger fades," Claire continued, "and what's left is this, you and me, and two incredible children who deserve better than parents too afraid to try. So if you're serious, if you really want this, then I'm saying yes. To trying, to figuring it out, to building something real. I've never been more serious about anything in my life." Inside the house, Lily pressed her face harder against the window. "They're kissing," she announced to Liam. "Gross," Liam said, but he was smiling too. 6 months later, on a perfect Saturday in early October, the garden behind a small cottage in Vermont had been transformed into something from a storybook. Strings of golden lights hung from the white wooden fence, swaying gently in the autumn breeze. Lavender bloomed along the gravel path, even though the season was wrong for it, as if nature itself had decided to make an exception for this particular day. The scent drifted through the air, sweet and familiar, a ghost of memories past and a promise of memories to come. Wooden chairs lined both sides of the aisle, filled with the people who had stood by them through the hardest chapters. Not many, maybe 50 in all. Family, close friends, the kind of people who showed up when things fell apart and stayed when they came back together. At the front, beneath an arch woven with white roses and more lavender, Ethan stood waiting. He wore a slate gray suit that matched the soft clouds above. His hands were clasped in front of him, but they weren't steady. He'd been up since 5 that morning, too nervous to sleep, too excited to stay still. Marcus, his business partner and best man, stood beside him. "Breathe," he whispered. "You look like you're about to pass out." "I might," Ethan admitted. "Is that normal?" "Completely. You're marrying the woman you've loved for over a decade and meeting your daughter for real. I'd be worried if you weren't nervous." Music began to play. Soft and simple, a single violin and an acoustic guitar. The guests rose and turned toward the back of the garden. Lily appeared first, walking slowly, carefully, as if she carried something infinitely precious. Her pink dress swirled around her knees with each step. In her hands, a woven basket full of lavender petals. She scattered them methodically, creating a fragrant path, her face serious with concentration. When she reached the front, she looked up at Ethan and grinned. He winked at her, and her solemnity broke into giggles. Behind her came Liam, equally serious, both small hands clutching a velvet pillow bearing two simple gold rings. He walked with the careful precision of a child who knew he had an important job. His suit was identical to Ethan's, down to the pale blue tie. When he reached his father, he whispered, "I didn't drop them." "I knew you wouldn't, buddy." Liam took his place beside Ethan, standing tall, proud to be his father's best man. Then the music shifted, and Claire appeared. Ethan forgot to breathe. Her hair was braided gently down both sides, exactly the way she'd worn it in college, exactly the way he'd always loved. Small white flowers were woven through the braids, and a few loose curls framed her face. She wore no veil, no elaborate headpiece, just herself, beautiful and real. Her dress was simple, white cotton that flowed around her like water, moving with her as she walked. No lace, no sequins, no embellishments, just clean lines and soft fabric that somehow made her look both ethereal and grounded. Her eyes found his, and everything else disappeared. The guests, the garden, the music. There was only her, walking toward him, smiling through tears, her hand clasped in her mother's. Her mother, who had doubted Ethan 6 years ago, who had warned Claire away from him, now had tears streaming down her face as she placed her daughter's hand in his. "Take care of her," she whispered. "I will. I promise." Claire stepped up beside him, and Ethan had to remind himself to let go of her hand so the ceremony could begin. The officiant, an old college professor of theirs, smiled at them both. Ethan and Claire have asked to speak their own vows. Ethan, would you like to begin? Ethan nodded, then realized he was supposed to speak. His mind went blank for a terrifying moment. Then he looked at Claire, and the words came. I never believed in second chances, he began, his voice rough with emotion. I thought if you made a mistake, that was it. You lived with it. You moved on. You didn't get to go back. He paused, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. But you were mine, my second chance. My proof that sometimes if you're incredibly lucky, if you're willing to fight for it, you get another shot at the thing that matters most. His voice broke slightly. You gave me a daughter I didn't know I had. You raised her alone because I was too blind to see what was in front of me. You had every right to shut me out forever. But you didn't. You let me in. You let me try. You gave me the chance to be a father, to be a partner, to be the man I should have been 6 years ago. Claire's tears were falling freely now, but she was smiling. I can't promise I'll never make mistakes, Ethan continued. I'm human, and I'm flawed, and I'm still learning. But I can promise that I will show up every day, in the good times and the hard times, when it's easy and when it's not. I will choose you and Lily and Liam and the family we're building together. I will choose love over fear. Always. He took a shaky breath. You're my home, Claire. You always have been. And if you'll have me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life proving it. The garden was silent except for the sound of people trying not to sob audibly. The officiant turned to Claire. Claire? She looked at Ethan, then at Lily and Liam standing beside them, then back at Ethan. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong, despite the tears. 6 years ago you left me, she said simply, and I was angry. Oh, angry. I convinced myself I hated you, that I'd moved on, that I was better off without you. Ethan's hand tightened on hers. But the truth is, I never stopped loving you either. I told myself I had because that seemed easier than admitting I was still in love with someone who'd left me behind. But every time Lily asked about her father, every time she wanted to know what kind of man he was, I told her the truth. That you were kind, that you were brilliant, that you worked hard for what you believed in, that you had the kind of eyes that made people feel safe. Claire's voice wavered but didn't break. I raised our daughter on stories about you, even though I thought I'd never see you again, because I wanted her to know that her father was good, even if he wasn't there, even if we couldn't be together. I wanted her to love you. She paused, glancing at Lily, who was watching with rapt attention. And then a hailstorm brought you back to us. Literally, you saved our daughter from the storm, and in doing so you saved all of us. You came back, not because you had to, but because you chose to. You fought for us. You showed up. You became the father Lily needed and the partner I'd been too afraid to hope for. Claire reached up with her free hand and touched his face gently. So here's my promise. I promise to trust you, to let you in even when it's scary, to build this life with you instead of protecting myself from it. I promise to be honest, even when the truth is hard, to share my fears instead of hiding them, to believe that we can be different this time. Better. She smiled through her tears. You're my home too, Ethan. You always were. I was just too hurt to see it. But I see it now, and I'm not letting go again. The officiant had to clear his throat twice before he could continue. The rings? Liam stepped forward carefully, presenting the pillow. Ethan and Claire each took a ring. Then do you take Claire to be your wife, to love, honor, and cherish, in sickness and in health for as long as you both shall live? I do. His voice was thick but certain. Claire, do you take Ethan to be your husband, to love, honor, and cherish, in sickness and in health, for as long as you both shall live? I do. They slid the rings onto each other's fingers. Simple gold bands, no diamonds, no engravings, just solid, enduring, real. Then by the power vested in me by the state of Vermont, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Ethan, you may kiss your bride. He did, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, both of them were crying. The guests erupted in applause and cheers. Lily jumped up and down. Liam clapped so hard his hands must have hurt. As Ethan and Claire walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, lavender petals clung to their feet, releasing their scent with every step. The reception was small and intimate, held in the same garden as the ceremony. There was dancing and laughter, food and toast that made everyone cry again. But the most important moment came later, as the sun began to set and the golden lights cast everything in a warm glow. Lily tugged on Ethan's sleeve. He was talking to Claire's mother, but he immediately knelt down to his daughter's level. Since the ceremony, she'd been calling him Daddy, and each time she said it, his heart felt too big for his chest. "What is it, Princess?" "I have a wish," she said, her voice soft but serious. Ethan smiled. "What's your wish?" She leaned in close, her breath warm against his ear. "I wish we'll always be a family and never go away again." Ethan pulled back to look at her. Lily's eyes, so much like his own, were wide and earnest. He glanced at Claire, who had been watching them. She came over, and Ethan reached for her hand. "That wish already came true," he said, gathering both Claire and Lily into his arms. "We're forever now, all of us." Liam ran over and threw himself into the group hug, and they all laughed, tangled together. Complete. As night fell fully, the four of them stood at the edge of the garden. Each held a paper lantern, its base flickering with a small flame. "On three," Ethan said. "One, I saw it, two, three." Together they released the lanterns into the night sky. Four lights rose side by side, drifting upward, dancing in the breeze. They floated higher and higher, growing smaller until they looked like new stars being born. From behind, they looked like a portrait. Two adults, two small silhouettes, all connected by something invisible but unbreakable. And as the lanterns disappeared into the darkness, a truth settled over them like a blessing. Some people stopped believing in love. Some gave up on family. But sometimes love found you anyway. In a hailstorm, in the scent of lavender, in the voice of a child who didn't know your name, only your heart. The months that followed were not without challenges. Blending a family never is. There were adjustments, compromises, difficult conversations. Liam had nightmares sometimes, afraid that the new family would disappear like the old one had. Ethan would sit with him in the dark, reading stories until the fear faded. Lily struggled with sharing her mother after having Claire to herself for 5 years. Claire was patient, making sure to carve out special time just for the two of them. Ethan learned to balance work and family in ways he'd never managed before. Marshall Tech thrived, but he left the office at 5 every day, without exception. Dinner was sacred. Bedtime stories were non-negotiable. Claire had to learn to accept help, to let Ethan be an equal partner instead of trying to handle everything alone. It was harder than she'd expected, releasing that control. But slowly, steadily, they built something real. Something that felt less like piecing together broken parts and more like growing something entirely new. 1 year after the wedding, on a crisp autumn afternoon, the four of them hiked to a clearing in the woods near their home in Vermont. They'd moved there 6 months prior, leaving Portland behind for a fresh start in a place with no painful memories. The cottage was bigger than Claire's old place, with a yard large enough for a garden and a tree perfect for climbing. Lily had named it the Forever House within a week of moving in. In the clearing, they had a picnic. Sandwiches and apple slices and cookies that Lily and Liam had helped make that morning, which meant they were slightly burnt and absolutely perfect. "Tell us the story," Lily demanded, lying on her back in the grass, looking up at the clouds. "Which story?" Claire asked, though she knew. "The storm story, about how Daddy saved me." Ethan and Claire exchanged a glance. They'd told this story dozens of times already, but it never got old. "Well," Ethan began, lying down beside Lily, "it was a beautiful day at the fair. The sky was blue, and everything was perfect." "Until it wasn't," Lily added helpfully. "Until it wasn't," Ethan agreed. "The sky turned dark, and hail started falling. Big pieces of ice everywhere. And I was under a bench," Lily continued, taking over the story, "and I was scared. But then a man ran through the hail, even though it was hurting him, and he picked me up and kept me safe." "And you said your mom had told you about me," Ethan said softly. "Because she had. All my life she told me about the good man. And when I saw you, I knew it was you." Liam, not to be left out, piped up. And then you found out Lily was your daughter. That's right. And Mommy Victoria tried to take me away, but Daddy fought for me. Yes, he did, Claire said, ruffling Liam's hair. And then you got married and we became a family, Lily finished triumphantly. And we lived happily ever after, Liam added. We're still working on that part, Ethan said, smiling. Happily ever after takes practice. But we're doing good, right? Lily asked, suddenly worried. Ethan propped himself up on one elbow so he could see all three of them. His wife, his daughter, his son, his family. We're doing better than good, he said. We're doing perfect. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Ethan and Claire sat on the porch of the Forever House, wrapped in a shared blanket, watching the stars emerge. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? Claire asked quietly. Every day, Ethan admitted. If I'd stayed 6 years ago, if I'd been there when you were pregnant, if I'd been there for Lily's first steps, her first words, all those moments I missed. I'm sorry I took those from you. I know, and I've forgiven you. We've both forgiven each other for the things we got wrong. He pulled her closer. But I also think about how, if things had been different, I might have taken it all for granted. I might not have appreciated how precious this is. Claire considered this. So you're saying the pain was worth it? No, the pain was terrible and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But it taught me what matters. It made me fight for this in a way I might not have if it had come easily. He kissed the top of her head. Every moment with you and the kids feels like a gift now, because I know what it's like to live without it. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the Vermont woods. An owl hooted somewhere in the distance. Wind rustled through the trees. The story didn't end here, Claire said finally, echoing the words that had closed their wedding video. No, Ethan agreed. It had only just begun. Inside the house, in her small room painted lavender at her request, Lily woke briefly from a dream. She reached for her bunny, pulled it close, and whispered into the darkness, "Thank you for the storm." Then she drifted back to sleep, safe and warm and home. In the room next door, Liam slept with his fox tucked under one arm and a drawing clutched in his other hand, a picture he'd made that afternoon. 4 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. He'd labeled it in careful letters, "My family." And on the porch, 2 people who had lost each other and found their way back sat wrapped in each other's arms, grateful for second chances, for hailstorms, for lavender, and memories and children who believed in magic. Because sometimes the best love stories aren't about perfect people who never make mistakes. Sometimes they're about broken people who put in the work to become whole. Together, the end and the beginning.